What's up? What's up? What's up? So, wanted to come and give the third installment of Timber Week. There was installment 3A, which was a bit of a placeholder because of a lot of things that are going on here at the home, and just trying to still get out content, but sadly just haven't been able to do it on a scheduled basis like I usually do. But I've been doing the streams and everything else like that, so that content's been coming out. In other news, in terms of just personal financial life, I did get a night job, so I will be doing that. And, just reworking my schedule. Hopefully, everything could work out. I can actually work the job and keep both things going, so I don't have to make that hard decision of, like, trying to give up the night job or something like that. This will help in terms of just, taking care of debt a lot faster, and then also allow me to make improvements and do some of the things that I'm researching here with this whole Timber Week post or set of posts. Um, got family in the family just came in town this week or tonight, and they're here for the weekend, so this is gonna be fun. Um, but let's get into Timber Week and talk more about that. Um, so in the 3A, the first part of this video, or yeah, I guess the A side of this video. This is the B side. This is about pine straw harvesting. So gets a little bit into it with this article. It is a very long article. I actually converted it from text to speech, and that is what I did. That's what I posted. And I know that's probably not the best way to like get it, and some people can't deal with the voice as unnatural sounding, robotic. But it was a great way to consume this information. But I do want to go a little bit deeper into it. Another thing about consuming information in that way, it doesn't always stick with you. So bear with me here. I listened to that probably about 2 days, or I listened to that when I posted it. So that was like Wednesday. Now it's like getting into, yeah, Saturday. It's like 4:27 a.m. and Saturday morning. So oh good. But yeah. So hopefully we can get some good information on this 12-minute reading my ass. The thing took like 19 minutes for me to go through the text to speech. So with pine straw harvesting, the point of this is to actually have mid rotation or mid rotation during your actual pine straw, or sorry, your pine trees actually growing to a point where they get thinned out and then go on to actually get harvested, the first major harvest, which is like around, I think, 15 years or so. No, around 20 years or so, 15 to 20, and then it thins out before that. But 15 to 20 years is when you're actually harvesting something to make a decent amount of money off of it. And then 20 plus to even 30 is when you're doing like pine, like actually pole harvesting. So that's where you make a little bit more money. I do like this video. Actually, I do like this the last video I made where they actually gave us some good numbers in terms of what to expect for our harvest. But this was actually really good because it gives you a view into what you do in the middle or in between or during the time or in between harvests, between planting and harvesting and things like that. And also, it talks a little bit more about actually planning your plot of land to make it even better for pine tree or pine straw harvesting. This is actually a really good article. Let's see when it was actually posted. Yeah, it's posted about 22 years ago, so 2019. Yeah, well over 2 years now. Um, but it really gets into it, and essentially it says like talk to a person that's a professional, and then they can actually really help you, um, you know, get your whole forest or your investment, your plot of land properly planned so that you can actually harvest it. And I had the joy of like driving over to Alma, Georgia this week. Actually today or Friday, I should say, and that's where I kind of got this job at this timber company's little night gig. So we'll see how that works. Hopefully, it works out for me. But on the way there, just seeing some of the actual timber plantations or timber forests that people have, and it's just like looking at it. It's like, whoa, this is somebody's college fund. This is somebody's next house. This is somebody's X, Y, and Z. Like so many possibilities. Okay. So they get a little bit into the main questions here that they're trying to answer. What landowners need to know about their property? What landowners need to know about their objectives and management strategies? What landowners need to know about the pine straw market? So it really gets into the pine straw market, and it talks about getting into the pine straw market, what's actually feasible in your area, even things like, okay, you have a couple bales of pine straw. Do you bale it yourself? Do you actually lease your land out to another person so that they can actually harvest the pine straw? And then from there, what do you do in terms of um, what do you do in terms of actually ensuring the quality of your product? So I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't really know about this, but like, I didn't think about it at least. Is like when you're collecting all these pine straws, you have all these different sticks and limbs and things like that. Well, how do you clean those things up? How do you clean that out of your product to ensure that this doesn't happen all the time in terms of, or sorry, this doesn't um, ruin your product every time in terms of like, okay, now your product is tainted, dirty. Uh, it's not pure in a sense in terms of pure pine straw because people are paying for these bales and every bit counts. If you have a nice large limb in there or something like that, or quite a few limbs that they have to sort out, it's just going to be harder for them and they're going to have less actual pine straw, less bang for their buck. So that's like a pretty big thing. So in terms of property, what species are you growing? It talks about what species is growing, meaning like you have this property and it might have a mixture of hardwoods and even weeds or overgrown weeds and things like that, and it's not properly taken care of. So what do you need to do with that in terms of clearing it out and what you're going to do in terms of making sure that you maximize your profits? All right, so let's look at this. Pine straw suppliers and retailers usually prefer species with long needles. So it even gets into the different species of different trees and actually how the needles are bundled if they're in three or four, which is like loblolly pine, and then even more bundles of that, or even longleaf. Uh, Here we go. It's called longleaf. There's slash pine and there's longleaf pine. Grows better than the other three species in sandy, well-drained soil, but it will grow in almost all soil except prairie soils. Longleaf pine needles are approximately 8 to 18 inches long and usually occur in clusters of three. Um, I think this was the other one. So yeah, you have these different pine trees, and they produce different needles. Um, those different needles actually have different properties in terms of like the way they uh, retain water or stop water from flowing into certain areas or into your flower beds or anything else like that. Because a lot of people use this pine straw for landscaping and tamping down weeds because it pretty much blocks sunlight, but then it still allows for good airflow and water filtration or water penetration, I should say, into the soil. So something like that, you can essentially get a good amount of nutrients into that soil, but you won't get a lot of sunlight or anything else like that. So that stops weeds from growing. So it won't be too serious or bad in your actual um, what's it called, in your garden or where have you. All right. So it gets into how much pine straw a stand will produce, and essentially a stand, which is just in terms of terminology, this is just your plot of land, your acreage, or a certain section or field of pine trees that you've planted. All right, so in this one, pine straw yields reported in publications. So this gives you a little bit of information in terms of, okay, what pine straws are being produced, and it kind of actually shows you a great way of saying, okay, this is my area, and then in my area, if I get this pine straw or this set of pine straw and this many acres, then you can start counting out like how much is you could be making with this. Now, when you're actually dealing with pine straw, and even in the last video that we did, part two of this series, in part two, what we did is we actually had a little mini calculator that I made in Excel, and I put in my acreage. Um, my acreage that I would actually plant on. But it shows in the last article that we read in terms of pine straw that pine straw is usually done every 3 years and sometimes every other year. You actually want to keep enough pine straw on the ground or on the bed of your tree stand, um, or on the floor bed, uh, so that it can actually um, keep down weeds and other growth, so that it doesn't actually it doesn't promote the growth of other plants or anything like that. So you want to keep that in place and then let it collect and then build up and then go ahead and get it raked. But in between all that, you're gonna have to do the care of picking up sticks, branches, and all types of other stuff, and making sure that there's nothing really tainting the product itself. So, and it gets a little bit into that, so which is really kind of cool. So in these figures, I think it was figure 2 and 3. So it talks about like actually collecting the pine straw, but then also how to prune the trees in some cases. So what's it called? Sorry for the zapping. It's like my family came in here. We had the door open and everything else like that. So there's a ton of bugs coming in here. So a lot of things are getting zapped tonight. So this even talks about in terms of when you're planning your, excuse me, guys. But when you're planning your actual your pine tree stand, is how do you space things out? We can see here this has already gone through the initial thinning and maybe even a second one. I wouldn't say these are in. This is probably 10 plus years. Just some limited knowledge that I have of just looking at pine trees. I don't know what species this is right off the bat. But with this, you can see these are pretty young. They're still pretty small in my eyes. I've seen trees larger than this. I have some trees on my property that are loblolly or within, this family of pine, that I would be selling and everything. And I haven't gotten good enough. So I will say that. So please take that with a grain of salt, right? Maybe a couple grains. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, sorry guys. Yeah, really trying to get this video out for you all. I apologize. So I'm looking at this and this looks pretty young, but we can see that it's already been thinned out. We do see some tree stumps like here in the distance, but we can see that it's already been thinned out mainly because they plant these things fairly close together. So whatever this is, maybe they didn't plant much here, but we can see how even these are pretty close together, and that's fairly close. You probably want to give a little bit more space, but you can also still, of course, get away with this depending on how you're planting it. You can plant them in rows, columns and rows, like you're used to. But even in the last article, they talked about planting them in a circular pattern, and that helped a lot with wind damage, or to reduce wind damage, and to actually increase profits over time in terms of the tree stand. So let's go back. So figure 2, hand raking pine straw in a planted longleaf pine stand in South Alabama. Oh, okay, there we go. Hand pruning of lower branches facilitates mechanical harvesting of pine straw and can improve tree form. So the improving in tree form is very important when you're talking about poles over the next couple of years. So if you're tending to your crop in a sense, in terms of this, in the sense, is this pine straw. Sorry, I didn't want to yawn too much more in the mic here. But you can see that it can improve the tree form, and that's good for pole pine. So these are your pines that are actually going to be used for light poles, utility poles, or maybe even other products that would require a lengthy pole or a straight pole as best as possible. Oh, so this is pretty good too. What property characteristics are conducive to pine straw harvesting? Okay, let's see here. Certain property characteristics are conducive to harvesting pine straw just as they are to harvesting for timber. If a stand is to be mechanically raked, accessibility requirements are important to accommodate machinery. For example, the presence of entry roads or tree rows wide enough to safely operate a tractor. So this just gets into, like, this stand here. We can see that it's good so we can go down this way, but going this way is just not going to happen, and that's just kind of the sacrifice that they made, where they lost a little bit here, but at least they can actually rake this pine straw with machinery, which actually increases their profits. It increases their profits over time because now they can actually use machinery and get things done a lot faster and harvest more, of course, over time. Um, A stand may need to be commercially mowed or have large debris removed to gain or maintain access. The stand needs to be flat with few to no terraces. A sloping stand, especially a natural stand where vegetation has not been controlled, is not an ideal site for mechanical harvesting of pine straw. So something like this is like this determines, okay, the piece of land that we want to go ahead and buy. I think I still have that here. And yeah, here we go. So if I look at this property, oh crap, no, we cross. Oh, looks like they don't have it maybe anymore. It looks like it got sold, I guess. Oh no, here it is. So if we look at this piece of land here, this is one that we've used before. Ton of pine straw, so this is definitely probably needs to be raked. Um, but we're looking at it here, and it's prepped for. It's pretty good in terms of it being ready to. And look at that, it goes the distance, man. Beautiful. But it's good, so we can actually put a machine in there depending on how big it is to actually go through and rake this. Definitely gonna have to clean up some stuff here just so it can actually be accessible. But definitely something that could be beneficial in the long run. But then we get to our problem here, which is all this water. So we have swampy areas, so you can guarantee that, of course, boom, you can't do nothing here, but you can't do nothing out to a couple feet as well. So it's not going to be dry land or dry land or anything like that. Now, if we look at I think it's the property map here. Yeah, so if we look at the flood for this area, oof, I think my map died. Let's see here. Maybe some terrain, some things don't show. Come on. Yeah, I guess it doesn't want to show here. So the last one of the last videos we did on this, I think it's like the first one actually. What's nice about this is that actually maybe I have to just go back. Let's get out of this and go here and then go to flood. Could be a zoom is off. There we go. So we can see that only about 40% of this is going to be available, especially during a flood or a lot of rain or something like that. So we're definitely going to have to be opportunists here and even be lucky, but taking advantage of opportunities just so we don't actually depend on luck so much. We're prepared for opportunities more than anything. So something like this, have everybody, your planters and everything like that in place so that when necessary, all you have to do is just go out there and plant whatever you need to when things get a little bit drier, especially during the winter or something like that, when there's not too much water or not too much precipitation, especially in this area. Trying to get used to the seasons and just keep observe everything and see how this all works in terms of like actually taking advantage of opportunities like this to where you can get a piece of property like this, but then you can plant a little bit more because now there's not too much water in the area. But then we also have to worry about how this water affects the pine tree itself, and planting the proper pines for the area. In our area, loblolly pine, and I think probably one or two others that are like offshoots of the loblolly pine family, I believe. Like your Alabama pine or something like that is what they call it, and some of the other loblolly pines in South Carolina. They're really good in wet areas. But again, all this research helps us with this. Anyway, let's get back to what's it called? Our or pine straw. So pine straw is really harvested every 3 years, and then maybe every other year thereafter, after the first one or after the first initial 3 years. But it takes about 3 years or so before you can actually do something like this. So maybe you actually stagger it to where you have probably a couple multi-acreage plots, like an 80 plus acre. From what I've been told, don't do this on less than say 10 acres or something like that. I will be doing this on like the 7 acres that I have, but I'll be using that mainly as a test. All right. So it also talks about fertilization. Okay. According to one source, and I'm reading this middle paragraph here. According to one source, fertilization on nutrient limited sites has been shown to generate a return on investment through increased pine straw production. The need to fertilize may also depend on what species of pine you have. Different species respond to fertilization in different ways. Loblolly stands are likely to need fertilization more than stands of other species. In fact, over-fertilization in longleaf forests can make the trees more susceptible to insects and diseases such as pitch canker. I don't know what pitch canker is, but I'm sure it's kind of like the same thing as like an orange canker or citrus canker, and it's really bad for the trees in terms of what they produce, and it can actually kill them over time. Oh, and this is actually a very important thing too. A laboratory analysis of the soil and needles can identify nutrient deficiencies and help determine if fertilization is needed on your lands. Such analysis is, or such analysis, I think that's a word. Yeah, such analyses, I'll say analyses, um, can also determine likelihood of response to fertilizer in terms of timber production. For more information on soil samples and testing, contact your county extension office, and then it gives you a link that you can go to. And of course, this article will be linked in the description notes below, but it's on aces.edu. All right, so and it talks about burning too. So you can use burning to actually tend to your crop or to your tree stand, and that will help clear out some of your brush and things like that. Now, just so you can manage and maintain it a little bit better. But something like that, of course, can harm the tree, so you have to be very careful with it. So let's talk about this, or let's read this. Okay. As with all Civil, sil, silviculture. I've never heard that. Silviculture treatments. Use the scheduling of prescribed burning depends on a landowner's objective and stand conditions. Burning is commonly applied before the first pine straw harvest, so that's within the first 3 years. Probably at 3 years you're not doing this or something like that, or if you're at doing this at 3 years. Regular burning may also continue during pine straw harvest years, for example, to promote grass growth for wildlife. So when they talk about grass growth for wildlife, that's if you're, probably hunting on that land or something like that. Um, that's going to be great for deer and other wildlife that you might hunt, but it also would be great for things like foxes and coyotes and whatever is normal in your area. So got to be careful of things like that. Um, yes, I said foxes, and I know I don't think they really eat grass or anything like that. They're not herbivores, but they eat the things that eat grass. So that's what you're talking about, such as your rabbits, hares, and then of course up to your deer and whatever else you may have on there that are larger game and things like that. All right. So this is pretty interesting, and I'll probably go through one or two more points in this article, but it's a very lengthy one. I would definitely suggest that you listen to the last video, which is Timber Week Part 3A, where I just did a text to speech on this using this free app. How will pine straw removal affect the site? Pine straw provides many mulching benefits, making it a valuable commodity among landowners and homeowners. Pine needles provide protection against surface erosion and moderate soil temperature for moisture, and they inhibit growth of weeds. All right, so pretty much it protects against like maybe your soil getting washed away, so it makes it a little bit harder for that to happen, especially during heavy rains. And then of course it provides a good temperature, so that promotes actual growth of the actual pine trees themselves, and possibly in just in terms of a better what's it called, a better environment, or actually increase has a good environmental impact. That's what it's trying to get out there. And of course, they inhibit the growth of weeds, which weeds, of course, will just rob nutrients of the surrounding plants and pretty much suffocate them. Mhm. Okay, pine forests provide important benefit. Excuse me. Important benefits to environment and to many wildlife species. Studies show that raking increases loss of vegetation species and in the understory of longleaf forest. These losses, however, may be temporary. In one study, losses observed and the length of time those effects were experienced differed based on the other site conditions. Based on other site conditions, landowners need to be aware, especially if managing simultaneously for wildlife. So you have maybe a hunting stand or something like that. I was actually approached by someone to hunt on my property for a decent little chunk of change. I wasn't too I wasn't I'm not too well familiar I'm not too educated on that or knowledgeable of that subject, but this might be something I want to do, and you can actually do that, of course, on your forest. So in between those times of harvest, then you also have land that can be hunted on, and you could pay X amount of dollars and kind of rent that out a little bit, so or lease that out to a couple of people doing hunting, and that's really big around here, like really big. All right. Let's skip ahead a little bit. I know I didn't finish that, but I want to go through this a little bit more. Pine straw harvesting operations. So this is the pine straw market question. But pine straw harvesting operations require some upfront investment from the landowner. One of the biggest expenses is preparing the land and making sure it is clean and free of debris such as dead wood, pine cones, tree limbs, and unsuitable vegetation such as hardwoods, vines, or shrubs. So you don't want that mixture of hardwoods in there because that is in a sense makes it a little bit harder and people have to sort it out. Also, hardwoods are probably a little bit harder to process and probably be used for other things. You do have to remember that loblolly pine and pines like it in terms of what we're talking about are mainly used for like toilet goods, and even like cardboard and things like that, I believe, as well as your usual everyday printing and writing and printing paper. Hmm. Yeah, and it starts talking about a little bit more of like what contract is appropriate. So let's look at this. Landowners can collect pine straw themselves, usually by hand raking and using a box baler. Landowners must then not only perform hard manual labor, but also market the pine straw themselves, receiving payment on a per bale basis. This process is labor and time intensive and requires investment in equipment. So it's really trying to not really push you, but it's trying to lean towards, hey, if anything, you might want to actually farm this work out or subcontract this work out to somebody else that can actually do it probably a little bit better, or and then pay you a little bit of a cut or pay you for your product up front so you don't have to actually market your pine yourself to other people. All right, so that's pretty much it for the article. I do want you guys to go through and read this and even listen to 3A. I know it's hard to listen to 3A, but maybe you have a better reading software where you can copy this text and then go from there. Yeah, we just did a quick overview on this. I think it's just definitely something that we want to keep on our radar in terms of maximizing the profit of our land or property. As I'm getting a little bit more knowledgeable about, talk about all of this and talking to people around here, we're seeing where that this land is not just something that that's pretty that you look at and you have to maintain, but it's something that can actually give you a return of some sort if you talk to the right people and go from there. All right, as always, please take whatever I say with a grain of salt. If you're not taking it with a grain of salt, you're low on sodium. Do your research, talk to people, get out there. Maybe even take a class or a course, come back and say, hey, Mike, I think you're totally wrong. Or, hey, Mike, you have a point here, but let's make improvements here, here, and here in terms of my argument or in terms of my thought process of this. Mindset is very important in all of these things, and I hope I help in some way help you all to improve your mindset so that you can actually make better investments over time. Alrighty, peace.